Let's talk about the American car industry, a cornerstone of the nation's identity, a symbol of innovation, and for decades a source of pride and prosperity for millions of families. Once, these assembly lines were the beating heart of American manufacturing, churning out vehicles that define generations. But today, that legacy faces an unprecedented crisis. In the spring of 2025, Ford, an icon whose blue oval is recognized around the world, suddenly hit a wall. The company, which had weathered wars, recessions, and fierce competition, now found itself in uncharted territory. The cause? Sweeping new tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, designed to protect American industry but instead sending shockwaves through every corner of the automotive world. Practically overnight, the cost of building a car soared by 25%. For automakers, this was a staggering blow, one that rippled out to every supplier, dealership, and customer. Ford, GM, and Stellantis were blindsided. Executives scrambled to make sense of the new reality, as decades of carefully built supply chains were thrown into chaos. This wasn't a minor hiccup, it was a 5-alarm fire. Boardrooms filled with urgent meetings, and the sense of panic was palpable. The very foundation of North American manufacturing, built over a century, was suddenly under attack. Factories that once buzzed with activity now stood eerily silent. The Ford F-150, America's best-selling vehicle and a symbol of working-class success, became the face of chaos as its cross-border supply chain broke down, parts shipments stalled at borders, and production lines ground to a halt. For millions of Americans, the dream of owning a new car turned into a financial nightmare. Prices skyrocketed, loans were denied, and families were forced to put their plans on hold. The very policy meant to protect American jobs now threatened to cripple the industry. Stock markets tumbled, global partners retaliated with their own tariffs, and uncertainty spread like wildfire. In factory towns across the Midwest, job losses loomed. Plants closed their gates, small businesses suffered, and entire communities faced an uncertain future. The great tariff gamble had begun, and from day one it was clear, American workers and consumers would pay the price. Protests erupted, wallets emptied, and anxiety grew. Ford's collapse is a stark warning of just how quickly things can unravel when the system is shocked. The story of America's car industry is being rewritten, and the next chapter is anything but certain. So what's a tariff? You've probably heard the word tossed around in the news, especially when global trade gets heated, but what does it actually mean for you and the economy? A tariff is basically a tax that governments put on goods coming in from other countries. The idea is to make imported products more expensive, so shoppers are more likely to buy things made at home. In theory, this helps local businesses and workers by giving them a competitive edge. In March 2025, the Trump administration made headlines by slapping a hefty 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, and ramping up tariffs on goods from China. This was a dramatic move that sent shockwaves through the global trading system. The official reason? National security and protecting American jobs. The administration argued that these tariffs would shield American industries from unfair foreign competition and keep factories humming. But here's the catch: modern economies are deeply interconnected. Products often cross borders multiple times before reaching your hands, and supply chains stretch across continents. A tariff isn't a precise tool, it's more like a sledgehammer than a scalpel. It doesn't just hit foreign companies, it ripples through the entire supply chain, affecting manufacturers, retailers, and even you, the consumer. The tariffs went into effect after tense negotiations broke down, with the administration betting that Canada and Mexico would quickly give in to U.S. demands. But they stood their ground, refusing to back down. Instead of a quick resolution, the world braced for economic turbulence. Markets wobbled, businesses scrambled to adjust, and uncertainty spread like wildfire. The goal was to protect American industry, but the immediate effect was widespread panic and confusion. Companies didn't know how to plan, and workers feared for their jobs. It was like trying to fix a small leak by blowing up the whole plumbing system, sudden, dramatic, and messy. The result? Chaos for businesses and families alike, as everyone scrambled to make sense of the new rules and rising costs. To understand why tariffs hit the auto industry so hard, you first have to look under the hood, literally and figuratively. The story of how a Ford is really built is far more complex than most people realize. Despite the Made in USA badge, an American car is rarely 100% American. In fact, it's a global effort involving thousands of parts and workers from all over the continent. Building a car today is like solving an international puzzle, with each piece coming from a different place. From bolts to bumpers, the supply chain stretches across borders and oceans. Thanks to decades of trade deals, automakers can source parts from across North America and beyond, making the process more efficient and affordable for everyone involved. Take the Ford Bronco Sport and Maverick, for example. While they're sold as American vehicles, they're actually assembled in Mexico, where skilled workers put them together using parts from all over. The engines for Ford's Super Duty trucks? Built in Mexico. The transmissions for the Corvette? Manufactured in Canada. It's a true team effort, with each country specializing in what it does best. This cross-border system is the secret sauce that keeps the industry running, combining Canadian steel, Mexican labor, and American design ingenuity into a single, seamless process. Parts don't just cross borders once, they might travel back and forth several times before a car is finished. Each crossing is a carefully timed step in a massive logistical dance. For example, a single door panel might be stamped out of steel in Canada, shipped to Ohio for shaping, sent to Mexico for wiring, and finally installed in Michigan. That's just one part out of thousands. But when tariffs are imposed, every border crossing means another tax. What was once a model of efficiency quickly turns into a logistical nightmare, with costs piling up at every step. This intricate system didn't appear overnight. It took decades to build, starting with the 1965 Auto Pact, which first linked the US and Canadian auto industries and paved the way for today's integrated market. When tariffs hit, they didn't just disrupt this system, they threatened to shatter it completely, putting jobs and entire communities at risk. Ontario's premier warned that shutdowns would ripple across both sides of the border. He was right. Factories slowed, workers worried, and uncertainty spread. The North American auto puzzle, once perfectly interlocked, was suddenly smashed apart with no clear plan to put it back together. The result? Chaos for automakers struggling to keep production lines moving, workers facing layoffs, and consumers hit with higher prices and fewer choices. The integrated market that made American cars competitive and affordable was suddenly in jeopardy, threatening the future of the entire industry. The very foundation of North America's auto industry, built over generations, was now crumbling, leaving everyone to wonder what comes next. What happens when building a car costs 25% more? Prices soar. Automakers can't absorb the hit, they pass it to buyers. Analysts warned, tariffs would wipe out profits for Detroit's Big Three. The result? New cars cost $1,000 to $9,000 more, depending on imported parts. Even US-assembled cars got pricier, since so many components come from abroad. Used car prices jumped too, as buyers fled the new car market. The average household faced an extra $1,000 a year in costs, not just from cars but from all imported goods. Inflation spiked, squeezing family budgets. The promise to protect prosperity backfired, making everyone poorer. The American dream of a new car was slipping out of reach. For Ford, the financial hit was brutal. Their business model relied on free-flowing trade. The tariffs smashed supply chains and profits. CEO Jim Farley's warnings were no exaggeration. Profits evaporated, threatening investments and jobs. Layoffs loomed, not just for Ford workers but for suppliers, logistics, and dealerships. Canada warned of 1 million jobs at risk. The US faced a similar threat. The irony? Tariffs meant to save jobs now endangered them. The United Auto Workers, once supportive, now saw the policy threatening their own members. The industry was trapped, absorb costs and risk bankruptcy, or pass them on and face layoffs anyway. Wall Street panicked. The Dow plunged over 1,300 points in a week. Investors dumped automaker stocks, eroding the value of Ford, GM, and Stellantis. This wasn't just a blow to the rich, it hit millions of Americans' retirement savings. The fear-spread tariffs threatened to slow the entire US economy. GDP growth projections dropped from 2.5% to just 1%. Fewer jobs, lower wages, and economic stagnation loomed. The tariffs acted as a brake, pushing the economy toward recession. The market's message was clear. This policy was economic self-harm. Uncertainty froze business investment and hiring. The trade war's real cost was confidence, and that was evaporating fast. Predictably, Canada and Mexico hit back hard. They imposed their own tariffs on American goods, escalating a trade dispute into a full-blown trade war. Canada's response was swift: $155 billion in retaliatory tariffs, bans on U.S. products, and threats to cut electricity exports. Mexico's president called the tariffs unjustified and promised tough countermeasures. Mexican business leaders warned of recession and soaring unemployment. China, already in a trade fight with the U.S., escalated too, targeting American agriculture. U.S. farmers, especially in Trump's base, were hit hard. The trade war now raged on three fronts, with no end in sight. Businesses and consumers on all sides suffered, the only winners chaos and uncertainty. Auto industry leaders sounded the alarm: these tariffs are a disaster. Ford's CEO warned of industry collapse. GM's CFO hinted at moving jobs overseas if tariffs stayed. Stellantis called the policy a blunt instrument, punishing the entire North American system. These weren't anti-American elites. They were fighting for millions of jobs. On the factory floor, the United Auto Workers faced a dilemma. They'd long supported tariffs to protect jobs, but now saw them threatening their own members. The union was torn between principle and reality. Politicians dismissed CEO warnings as fear-mongering, framing it as workers versus corporations. But in truth, their interests were aligned. A bankrupt automaker employs no one. The front line saw disaster coming, but Washington wasn't listening. As of June 2025, the American auto industry is at a crossroads. If tariffs stay, expect higher car prices, falling sales, plant closures, and mass layoffs. Ford and others may move jobs overseas, an ironic twist for America first. The North American manufacturing bloc could be permanently fractured, leaving the U.S. weaker and isolated. The alternative? Reverse course, negotiate with Canada, Mexico, and China, and rebuild trust. This would stabilize the industry, ease inflation, and admit the tariff gamble failed. The fate of Ford and the entire industry depends on choices made now. In a global economy, no country is an island. Prosperity depends on cooperation and stable supply chains. For the sake of workers and families, America must choose the road back to economic sanity.